The house smelled like cinnamon and loneliness. I remember thinking that as I pushed open the front door, expecting to hear Jonathan humming some obnoxiously cheerful tune from the kitchen. Instead, there was only the faint sound of something creaking, a steady rhythm, like the tick of an old metronome. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. At first, I thought maybe the wind had found its way in through the attic vent again, the one Jonathan promised to fix after the next trip. But then I saw him, Henry, my husband's stepfather, sitting in Jonathan's favorite chair, rocking gently, eyes half closed, a small smirk on his face. The man looked like he'd been carved from oak and left to harden in a storm. Even from the doorway, I could see the subtle rise of one eyebrow, like he'd been expecting me for hours. On the coffee table, perfectly centered, lay a folded note. Jonathan's handwriting, tidy and smug. I read it once, twice, then again, just to be sure I wasn't misinterpreting sarcasm as insanity. Off on a cruise with my ex. You're staying to care for Henry. Happy Thanksgiving. I let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a cough. The audacity of it was almost poetic. My husband had left me, for his ex-wife, and somehow made me the caretaker of his stepfather. That took a special kind of arrogance, the sort they hand out at birth to men who think charisma can erase betrayal. Henry opened one eye and said, "Shall we start?" I stared at him. "Start what?" He leaned forward, the chair creaking louder now. "Getting even." The words hung in the air, casual and confident, like he was suggesting we rearrange the furniture, not plot retribution. I should have walked away right then, maybe poured a glass of wine and called my sister to scream into the phone. But something in Henry's tone made me pause. Not pity, not comfort, but understanding. That rare language of people who have seen deceit up close and decided to take notes instead of tears. He motioned toward the couch and I sat. Jonathan always was a performer, Henry said. Liked to make grand gestures, the kind that make him feel powerful, even when they're childish. Cruise with his ex, I muttered. That's not a gesture. That's a cliché with a tan. Henry chuckled. And yet, it's exactly what I expected. You should read what's in the envelope next to that note. I hadn't even noticed the thick envelope tucked underneath the folded paper. Inside were receipts, resort charges, flight itineraries, luxury dining reservations, all under a shared account. Our account. The numbers hit harder than the betrayal itself. Thousands of dollars gone, siphoned over months while I'd been patching up real emergencies in the ER, thinking the long shifts and missed dinners were the price of stability. He's not just dishonest, Henry said. He's sloppy. I looked up sharply. You knew? He didn't flinch. I suspected. Men like Jonathan have patterns. I used to catch people who thought they were smarter than the rules. Same kind of charm. Same need for applause. I'd met Henry only a handful of times since our wedding. He was the kind of man who said little and remembered everything. He'd retired from the police force before I joined Jonathan's life, but his presence still carried that air of unspoken authority. Now he looked more amused than angry, like my heartbreak was a puzzle he'd been itching to solve. So what? You want to turn this into some kind of father-in-law bonding exercise, I said. You track him, I make snacks. He grinned faintly. Something like that, though I'd recommend stronger tools than snacks. For a long moment, I didn't speak. My thoughts were a tangle of disbelief and humiliation, threaded with something sharp, a quiet spark I hadn't felt in years. Maybe I'd been too exhausted to notice before, but now it flared bright, the urge to take control. All right, I said slowly. Where do we start? Henry's eyes gleamed. With the truth, always. We moved to the kitchen table, the same one where Jonathan once bragged about his business expanding. It had expanded all right, into deception and luxury escapes. Henry took out his old laptop, booted it up like it was a weapon from a forgotten war. "What exactly did you do before retirement?" I asked. "Fraud division," he replied casually. "I spent 25 years watching people pretend their lies were investments." I raised an eyebrow. "So this is nostalgic for you?" "Call it a late hobby." We spent the next few hours going through bank records and emails. Everything he needed was there. No hacking, no fancy tricks. Just old-fashioned observation. Jonathan had grown lazy. He'd transferred money between accounts with laughable subtlety, used the same password variations for his work and personal logins. At one point, I found myself laughing, quietly, bitterly. He once told me he never repeated passwords because it was risky. Henry smirked. "He repeats everything, lies, mistakes, women." That line lingered. Around midnight, I made coffee. Henry refused sugar, said it distracted the mind. I added 3 spoons to mine just to be contrary. "You're not what I expected," I told him. "Neither are you," he said. "You didn't cry." I stared into my mug. "Crying is overrated. I prefer lists." He nodded approvingly. "Good. Then list what you want." It caught me off guard. No one had asked me that in months. Not patients, not colleagues, certainly not Jonathan. I didn't answer right away. The sound of the refrigerator humming filled the silence. Finally, I said, "I want him to feel small. I want him to realize that the quiet one was never weak." Henry leaned back. "Then we'll make him feel smaller than the truth." When I went to bed that night, I didn't sleep. The house felt unfamiliar, stripped of its usual noise. Jonathan's podcasts, his half-laughed phone calls, his insincere apologies. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the note in my mind. "Off on a cruise with my ex." The phrasing was almost proud, like he believed I'd sigh, accept it, and move on. He really didn't know me. By morning, I'd cleaned the kitchen, made breakfast for Henry, and put on my scrubs for work. The routine steadied me. The ER was chaos, but it was predictable chaos. You could measure it, treat it, close the wound. Betrayal, on the other hand, was a long, invisible injury that refused to clot. During lunch break, I called Jonathan's office. His assistant sounded nervous, confirming he was away on business. I thanked her sweetly, pretending not to hear the hesitation in her tone. She knew. Maybe everyone knew. When I got home that evening, Henry had printed documents spread across the table, like a general preparing for battle. "You weren't kidding about the lists," he said. "You should see how many he's made. Reservations, hidden transfers, credit cards in his name only." I sat down beside him, scanning the pages. "He's consistent. At least there's that." "He's predictable," Henry corrected. "And predictable people are easy to dismantle." I smiled faintly. "You sound almost cheerful about this." He shrugged. "It's been a while since I've done something that mattered." That night, we found the cruise itinerary. Caribbean, 7 days. Jonathan and Jennifer booked under Mr. and Mrs. Lane. The irony nearly made me choke on my tea. "Guess I've been promoted to caretaker," I said. "And she's the new Mrs. Lane." Henry didn't react. He was focused on something else. A pattern in the credit card charges leading up to the trip. "He's been transferring money from your joint account into a personal one under his company's name. That's misuse of funds if it's company money." "He always said business trips were reimbursed," I murmured. "Then we'll make sure his company knows how he reimbursed himself." I stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely." We began drafting an email, not vindictive, just factual. Receipts, dates, transactions, no lies, no exaggerations. The kind of truth that burns slowly but permanently. As Henry typed, I watched his hands, steady, precise. The same hands that probably once signed off on reports that ruined careers. Now they were crafting my quiet rebellion. "Do you think I'm petty?" I asked. He didn't look up. "No, you're practical. There's a difference." I almost laughed. Jonathan used to call me boring. Then let's make boredom your superpower. The following morning, I woke early and checked Jonathan's email. I half expected guilt to creep in. It didn't. Instead, I felt something calmer. Clarity. The suburban sunlight spilled across the living room, glinting off the family photos we'd once displayed proudly. One of them showed Jonathan holding my shoulders, both of us smiling like we believed we were unbreakable. I turned it face down. That evening, I visited the neighbor, Mrs. Danner, under the pretense of returning a borrowed dish. She greeted me with too much sympathy in her eyes. Gossip travels faster than sound in this town. Heard Jonathan's away, she said, tilting her head. Cruise, I replied casually. Apparently, he needed a vacation from stability. Her eyes widened, unsure if I was joking. I smiled and waved it off. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Every rumor was a small spark, and I planned to make a quiet fire out of them. By the time I got back, Henry had prepared dinner. He wasn't much of a cook, but he made excellent pasta, the kind that didn't need apology. We ate in comfortable silence until he said, "You're handling this well." "I'm handling it logically," I said. "There's a difference." He nodded. Logic is the only thing that works. Emotion gives them power. After dinner, I walked through the house, room by room, mentally cataloguing what was mine and what was his. It was like walking through a museum of shared lies. The couch he found on sale, but charged to my card, the wine rack he never filled, the framed travel photos from trips I'd never been invited on. I stood in the doorway of his office, staring at the laptop he'd left behind. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. It leads you to truths you can't unlearn. I opened it. His email was still logged in. A single folder titled Itinerary waited like an invitation. Inside were not just bookings and receipts, but messages between him and Jennifer. Glowing, rehearsed, dripping with nostalgia. There were others too. One with Tom Harker, his so-called associate. Their exchanges were full of cryptic jokes, inside references, and too much familiarity. It wasn't just betrayal, it was partnership. I sat there for a long while, reading until the sentences blurred together. When I finally looked up, Henry was standing in the doorway. "Find what you needed?" he asked. "More than that," I said quietly. "I found confirmation." He nodded once. "Good. Now we move from discovery to design." I closed the laptop gently, almost reverently. "Design of what?" "Justice," he said. "Our kind." His calm tone sent a ripple through me, not fear, not excitement, just focus. As I stood, something inside me settled. The house no longer felt empty. It felt like a starting line. Jonathan's voice used to echo here. Confident, charming, full of rehearsed warmth. Now, the silence belonged to me. When I went upstairs that night, I passed the note again, still on the table. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my pocket. Not as a keepsake, but as evidence. I glanced toward the rocking chair. Henry was there again, reading an old crime novel, the faint rhythm of the chair steady in the quiet. He didn't look up as he said, "Sleep well. Tomorrow we draw the map." I smiled faintly. "And where does it lead?" "Home," he replied. "Your kind, not his." I went to bed without answering, but my thoughts were alive, restless, sharp, certain. Somewhere between the first and second floor, I realized something I hadn't admitted out loud yet. I wasn't waiting for Jonathan to come back. I was waiting for the right time to make sure he wished he hadn't. The first morning of our quiet partnership began with the smell of coffee and printer ink. Henry was already awake, papers stacked in small, precise piles on the dining table. He looked like a retired general preparing for a campaign, except his troops were receipts, and his battlefield was a marble countertop. "Sleep well?" he asked without looking up. "As well as anyone whose husband has run off to the tropics," I said. "How's the war effort?" "Progressing. Your husband left a trail even a toddler could follow. I've seen smarter criminals in soap commercials." That earned him a smile. My humor was coming back, dry but there. It felt strange, laughing at my own betrayal, but the alternative was dissolving into tears, and I'd already decided crying was too much of a luxury. I poured coffee and leaned over the table. "What's the plan, General?" Henry's finger tapped the top sheet. "We make a timeline. Every withdrawal, every trip, every lie. Then we let gravity do the work. You don't push him off a cliff. You remove the guardrail and let him walk." "You're disturbingly poetic for a man who irons his socks," he grunted. "I iron because wrinkles lead to distraction." That was Henry in a nutshell. Methodical, unflappable, occasionally alarming. I found myself studying him as I sipped my coffee. How had Jonathan ever been raised by someone this disciplined? Then again, Jonathan wasn't raised. He was polished, like a car for show. Before noon, we'd charted every suspicious transaction over the past 6 months. Luxury hotels, jewelry, fine dining, all consistent, all under names I didn't recognize. I'd expected Jennifer's name to appear everywhere, but it was the other one that froze my focus. Tom Harker. The first time I saw it, I assumed it was business. "He works with this guy," I said. "A consultant. I've met him twice." Henry's eyes lifted. "He's spending company money on him?" I hesitated. "Maybe work expenses." Henry handed me a new stack. "Then explain why your husband's card paid for a weekend villa for 2 in Miami. During the same week, he was supposedly in Boston for a conference." I stared at the document. My pulse quickened, not from heartbreak but insult. All those nights I'd made excuses for his late returns. Now they came with itemized receipts. "So he wasn't just traveling for work," I muttered. "He was networking." Henry said nothing. The silence was answer enough. At the hospital that day, I was distracted. I missed a coffee break, nearly walked into a supply cart, and smiled too brightly at a patient who asked if I had plans for Thanksgiving weekend. My coworkers assumed exhaustion. They weren't wrong. I drove home that evening, replaying every conversation I'd had with Jonathan in the past 3 months. His evasion suddenly seemed less clever and more pathetic. The man I'd thought was cunning had simply been lazy. When I walked through the door, Henry was on the phone, his tone clipped and professional. "Yes, that's correct," he was saying. "Company reimbursement logs from last quarter. I'll hold." He muted the line and looked at me. "They're sending his employer's compliance officer the statement you drafted. All perfectly legal." "You're scaring me a little," I admitted. "You scare easily," he said. "Besides, you wrote it. I just know where to send it." I dropped my bag and leaned against the counter. "You realize this could ruin him?" Henry shrugged. "He ruined himself. We're just holding up the mirror." I should have felt guilt. I didn't. What I felt instead was control, a clean, unfamiliar sensation that tasted better than any apology Jonathan could offer. We ate dinner in silence. Halfway through, Henry asked, "How are you handling the gossip?" I almost laughed. "Oh, the neighborhood already knows. Mrs. Danner called this morning to check in, which means everyone on Oak Ridge Lane knows Jonathan ran off with his ex." "And you told her?" "That he's allergic to responsibility." Henry smirked. "Excellent. Keep the narrative short. The simpler the story, the faster it spreads." He meant it strategically, and it worked. Within 24 hours, I noticed the shift. Fewer sympathetic glances, more curious ones. By the next morning, 2 of my so-called friends had texted variations of, "You okay?" code for, "We're talking about you." I didn't mind. Let them talk. Every whisper chipped away at Jonathan's image of perfection. That Friday, I drove to the hospital, under a sky the color of dishwater. The day passed in flashes. Patients, paperwork, overheard laughter that had nothing to do with me. During a short break, I checked Jonathan's social media, something I hadn't done in weeks. There it was, a new photo. Sunlight, ocean, 2 champagne glasses. Caption, "Paradise found." Only one visible hand in the shot, his. He hadn't tagged anyone, but I didn't need names. The style was familiar, the tone smug, and the reflection in the wine glass, barely visible but there, showed a woman's face, Jennifer's face. I saved the image before he could think to delete it. Evidence of arrogance. That night, Henry and I reviewed the data again. "He's on the cruise through Sunday," he said. "If he follows the itinerary, he'll dock in Fort Lauderdale by Monday." "Perfect timing," I said. "His company will get the complaint Monday morning." "Now you're thinking like a strategist." Something about the way he said it filled me with both pride and unease. I wasn't sure which emotion fit me anymore. Saturday morning brought the next surprise. Claire, Jonathan's sister, appeared on my doorstep, carrying muffins and false concern. Her brand of sympathy came with sharp edges. "Rebecca, I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry for what Jonathan did," she began, voice dripping sincerity. "You must be embarrassed." "I'm tired, not embarrassed," I said, stepping aside. "Come in if you're here to talk like family. If you're here to gloat, I'll save you the trouble." Her eyes widened slightly. "I'd never gloat." "Of course not," I said, smiling. "That would require subtlety." She followed me into the kitchen, inspecting the counters like she expected to find evidence of misery. "You know, people talk," she said softly. "They think maybe you were too focused on work, that he needed attention." "Then maybe he should have bought a puppy," I replied. Her cheeks flushed. "I'm just saying, relationships take effort." "Effort, yes. Deception, no. He chose the second." The conversation went downhill from there. By the time she left, her polite smile had curdled into resentment. I closed the door behind her and exhaled slowly. My hands trembled, not from fear but adrenaline. Henry appeared from the hallway. "You handled that well." I wanted to throw the muffins at her. "That's also valid," he said dryly. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the cruise, the champagne, the laughter, the smugness. Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., I got up, grabbed my laptop, and began searching. It wasn't difficult. Cruise lines post public itineraries, and passengers love to overshare. Within an hour, I'd tracked down a guest vlog showing the deck party where Jonathan and Jennifer danced like a pair of carefree teenagers. I muted the video, but watched every frame. At one point, Tom appeared behind them, his hand on Jonathan's shoulder, 3 of them together. The realization hit with surprising calm. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was layered, complicated, and so meticulously self-sabotaging that I almost admired it. When I showed Henry the footage in the morning, he only raised an eyebrow. "That explains the extra charges," he said. "It explains everything," I replied. "The sudden secrecy, the private messages, the extra phone line." He studied me for a moment. "You're not shocked." "I'm done being shocked. It's inefficient." He smiled faintly. "You'd have made a fine detective." I shrugged. "I already work in triage. This is just emotional surgery." We spent the rest of the weekend preparing. Henry taught me how to compile digital files without leaving traces, how to time emails so they'd arrive exactly when intended. Every move felt surgical, deliberate. Sunday night, I took a long walk around the neighborhood. The houses glowed with that smug suburban contentment that used to comfort me. Now it all felt hollow, perfect lawns hiding perfect secrets. I wondered how many marriages behind those trimmed hedges were just as rotten as mine. Mrs. Danner waved from her porch. "Rebecca, you all right, dear?" "Never better," I called back, smiling. "I'm redecorating my priorities." She blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. I kept walking. When I returned, Henry was on the porch, smoking a rare cigarette. "You shouldn't start that habit again," I said. "Old rituals help me think." "Thinking's overrated. Acting works better." He nodded approvingly. "Tomorrow's the first strike. You'll be at work when the fallout begins. Best to look busy and unaware." I leaned against the railing. "And when he calls?" "Let him call. Don't answer. Nothing unsettles a liar more than silence." The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The sky was streaked with dull pink, like the world was embarrassed for me. Henry was already dressed, coffee in hand. "It's showtime," he said. On my drive to work, my phone buzzed twice. Unknown number. I ignored it. By mid-morning, 3 more calls. Then a text from Jonathan. "Beck, we need to talk. Something's wrong with my accounts." I stared at the screen, a slow grin forming. I deleted the message without replying. That afternoon, I received an email from Jonathan's assistant, marked urgent. "Please contact Mr. Lane. He's in distress. There are issues with the company's financial department." I forwarded it to Henry with a single line. "Operation working as intended." When I arrived home that night, Henry was watching the evening news. "He's called me too," he said. I didn't answer. "Good," I said. "Let him wonder who's pulling strings." For dinner, we ordered takeout and ate in silence. There was a strange comfort in the calm before chaos. Later, I opened my laptop again and checked social media. The cruise posts had stopped. In their place was a single update. "Trip interrupted. Unforeseen issues." I laughed softly. "Unforeseen," I repeated. That's one way to phrase karma. Henry looked over from his chair. "Enjoy it. Tomorrow he'll start begging." The next day, the begging began. A dozen missed calls. A voicemail that started calm, then panicked, then angry. "What did you do, Rebecca? They froze everything. They're saying I misused company funds." I replayed the message once more, purely for academic satisfaction. Then I deleted it and went back to reading patient notes. At lunch, Claire showed up at the hospital, pretending it was a coincidence. She stood in the hallway with her expensive coat and worried smile. "Rebecca, what's happening with Jonathan?" "He called me, said someone's sabotaging him." "Really?" I said, feigning surprise. "Maybe it's karma, or bookkeeping." Her eyes narrowed. "You didn't—" "I'm an ER nurse, Claire, not a hacker. I can barely use the printer." She stared at me, searching for something in my expression. When she found nothing, she muttered something about unfair treatment and left. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she plotted how to twist the story for the neighborhood. By the time my shift ended, I felt lighter than I had in months. The exhaustion wasn't gone, but it had meaning. Purposeful fatigue feels almost like satisfaction. When I pulled into the driveway, Henry was waiting outside. "It's done," he said simply. "His company suspended him pending review. He'll come home soon." "Good," I said, taking off my jacket. "I'll make sure he feels welcome." Henry chuckled quietly. "You've changed." "I've adjusted," I corrected. "Change implies choice. Adjustment means survival." That night, I couldn't resist one last act. I drove across town to a sleek apartment building, Tom Harker's address, courtesy of Henry's quiet network. His car, a black Audi, gleamed under the streetlight. I stood there for a moment, then took the small surgical scalpel I'd borrowed from work and traced a neat, shallow line across the hood. Not enough to ruin it, just enough to make him see it every time he looked. Then I slipped a note under his windshield wiper. "Drive carefully. Secrets have slippery roads." By the time I returned home, the tension in my chest had eased. Henry was still awake, reading in his chair. He looked up but didn't ask where I'd been. "You seem satisfied," he observed. "Just tying loose ends." He nodded, approving but silent. Upstairs, I washed my hands, brushed my teeth, and stared at my reflection. My face looked the same, but my eyes didn't. There was no trace of the woman who'd walked into an empty house on Thanksgiving. I turned off the light and whispered to myself, "He taught me strategy. I'm just improving the method." Outside, the rocking chair creaked again in the living room. Henry's calm voice followed, almost a whisper through the dark. "One move at a time, Rebecca. Let him come home. That's when the real game begins." And for the first time, I looked forward to the sound of his footsteps on the porch. Not because I wanted him back, but because I was finally ready to watch him fall apart, in the same house he once called perfect. When I opened my eyes the next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds like an unwanted guest. The house was still, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the old floorboards adjusting to the day. Henry was already up, of course. I could hear the sound of the coffee grinder downstairs, steady, efficient, like everything he did. By the time I made it to the kitchen, he'd spread out a fresh collection of papers across the table. He had the same expression as before, mild amusement mixed with quiet focus. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Do you sleep at all?" I asked. "When there's work to be done, not much." I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. "You sound like every supervisor I've ever had." "Then they were probably right," he replied. "You can rest when the plan's airtight." I sipped my coffee, watching him work. The old detective was meticulous, arranging our evidence with the precision of a surgeon. Bank statements, property records, joint investments, it was all there, printed and annotated in his tidy handwriting. "What's today's goal?" I asked. He glanced up. "We finished tightening the trap. His accounts are frozen, but not permanently. He'll try to transfer funds again when he realizes the scope. We'll make sure every road leads back to his own mistakes." "And the company?" "They're running their audit. He'll get the official notice by tomorrow. Until then, we make sure the personal side collapses too." I nodded, feeling that familiar buzz of quiet adrenaline. "You make revenge sound like accounting." He smiled faintly. "It is accounting. Emotional accounting." At work, my colleagues noticed the calmness I carried. They assumed I was finally moving on, which made me laugh internally. Moving on wasn't the goal. Moving efficiently was. During my lunch break, I called my bank to confirm the joint account freeze. The woman on the line was polite and sympathetic, clearly trying not to sound judgmental. When she confirmed that Jonathan had attempted 2 withdrawals in the past 24 hours, and both had been declined, I thanked her and hung up. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It was clean and quiet, like a well-written report. By evening, I returned home to find Henry in his usual chair, reading through a folder. "We've got him cornered," he said as soon as I walked in. "That easy." He handed me a document. "His company is sending a compliance officer to his house on Monday to collect work property. Laptops, credit cards, the works." "He's still on that cruise until Monday," I said, scanning the page. "Exactly," Henry said, leaning back. "He'll come home to find not only his personal accounts frozen, but his professional life dismantled." I sat across from him. "You enjoy this, don't you?" He tilted his head. "You think this is about enjoyment? No, it's about balance. Men like Jonathan always believe they're 2 steps ahead because they confuse charm for strategy. You, on the other hand, are learning to use their arrogance against them." "I'll take that as a compliment," I said. "It was one," he replied. That night, after dinner, I found myself restless. The house felt heavy with anticipation, like the quiet before a storm that refused to arrive. I decided to step outside, the chill air grounding me. The neighborhood was peaceful, sprinklers ticking, dogs barking faintly, the glow of televisions behind drawn curtains. Perfectly ordinary, perfectly unaware. I was halfway through my walk when I saw it, a car parked across the street from the house, dark windows, engine idling. For a second, I wondered if I was imagining things, but the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat shifted slightly, confirming otherwise. When I stepped closer, the car pulled away smoothly, turning the corner without haste. I went back inside, finding Henry in the kitchen pouring himself another cup of coffee. "We have company," I said. He didn't look alarmed. "Describe the car." "Black sedan, out-of-state plates, didn't look like a neighbor." He nodded once, calm as ever. Jonathan must have friends nervous about his situation. Or maybe he sent someone to watch the house. "Let him watch," Henry said simply. "You're not the one who should be afraid of scrutiny." I wasn't afraid exactly, but I did start checking the locks twice before going to bed. The next morning, I went to the hospital early, trying to distract myself. But even during the chaos of triage, my mind wandered. I kept replaying the image of that car, the slow turn of the wheels as it disappeared. It wasn't fear, it was curiosity. Why would Jonathan send anyone to watch me unless he suspected I had done something? When I got home, I found Henry on the porch with a satisfied look. "We had a visitor," he said. "The car?" He nodded. Stopped down the street for a few minutes, then left again. I took a photo of the plate. Let's just say our friend isn't very subtle. "Do we know who it is?" "Not yet, but I have contacts who can find out." He paused, studying me. "You're handling this well." "I've handled worse. I work in emergency medicine, remember?" "Yes, but in your line of work, chaos ends when the patient stabilizes. Here, it ends when you decide it's over." I didn't answer. Instead, I went to Jonathan's office upstairs and opened his laptop again. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a sign of guilt, maybe just the satisfaction of knowing his digital world was as messy as his moral one. Among his folders, I found one labeled Projects, Confidential. Inside were invoices, payments to a consulting firm under Tom Harker's name, tens of thousands in marketing expenses. I didn't need Henry to tell me what it meant. Jonathan had funneled money to Tom through fake business charges. It wasn't illegal exactly, but it was unethical enough to raise eyebrows. When I showed Henry, he whistled softly. "Now that's interesting. Can we use it?" "Oh, absolutely," he said, grinning. "Companies love nothing more than catching someone misusing resources. It's like finding an excuse to save money and fire someone at the same time." We spent the rest of the day compiling everything, every fake invoice, every overlapping date, every false expense. By the time we were done, my living room looked like a detective's office from a noir film. At some point, Henry poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "To progress," he said, raising his glass. I hesitated, then clinked mine against his. "To balance," I said. He nodded approvingly. "Balance it is." Later that night, I sat on the back porch, watching the yard lights flicker across the grass. I felt something shift in me. Not peace, not joy, but certainty. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the narrative. For years, Jonathan had told me who I was. Patient, forgiving, quiet. Now, I was rewriting that script line by line. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're not the only one planning something." My first instinct was disbelief, then anger. I showed it to Henry, who took the phone, studied the screen, and handed it back. "Could be Jonathan trying to intimidate you," he said. "Or someone else," I said. "Tom, maybe." "Possibly. Ignore it for now. Let them think you're unbothered." Easier said than done. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the message glowing in my mind like a stubborn echo. By morning, I was back at the hospital. It was a quiet day. Too quiet. Between patient rounds, I caught myself imagining Jonathan's face when he walked into his bank and realized he couldn't access a single cent. Then I pictured him returning home to Henry, and me waiting, evidence neatly arranged. It was almost cinematic. When I got home, Henry greeted me with a thin smile. "Good news," he said. "Our mystery car belongs to a rental agency. Guess who rented it?" "Tom," I said immediately. "Bingo." "Why would he be watching the house?" "Because he's panicking. If Jonathan's accounts are frozen, Tom's personal expenses are affected too. They're partners in more than just business, remember?" I rubbed my temple. "So what now?" "Now," Henry said, "we make him panic more." He explained his plan. We'd leak a few of the forged invoices anonymously to Tom's firm's internal compliance email. No accusation, just information. Enough to make him sweat. "Won't that lead back to us?" I asked. "Not if we do it right. I'll send it from a library computer. Old habits die hard." That evening, we drove to the public library. Henry insisted I stay in the car while he handled the details. I watched him walk across the parking lot, steady, purposeful, calm. He carried himself like someone who never rushed, because he always arrived exactly when he intended. When he came back, he handed me a folded note. "Done. He'll get the message by morning." "What did you write?" "Just a few lines. Your partner has been generous with your company's funds. Perhaps you should review his records." Signed it as a concerned associate. I almost felt bad for Tom. Almost. The next day was uneventful, until about 6 in the evening, when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo, Tom standing next to his car, staring at a long scratch across the hood. The caption read, "You think this is funny?" I smiled. "He got my message." Henry raised an eyebrow. "You sure he won't retaliate?" "I'm counting on it," I said. "The louder he gets, the faster he draws attention." And I was right. By the following morning, Tom had sent multiple angry emails to Jonathan's company, demanding explanations, mentioning reimbursements, and accidentally exposing their arrangement. The company's HR department was already in chaos, copying executives, asking for clarification. It was beautiful, messy, real-world chaos, the kind that couldn't be undone with an apology. By Friday, Jonathan's cruise was ending. I could almost picture it, him standing on deck, trying to reach his phone signal, watching his world crumble in real time. That evening, I made lasagna. Henry poured us each another glass of whiskey. We sat across from each other, the silence warm, the air charged with something unspoken. "You know," Henry said, "most people in your situation would have just left." I thought about it, I admitted, but leaving would have meant he got to keep the story. Now I own it. He nodded slowly. "You're stronger than you realize." "Maybe, or maybe I just got tired of being polite." He smiled, a rare thing that softened his usual sternness. Politeness is overrated. As I cleaned up the dishes, the doorbell rang. Henry motioned for me to stay back, walking toward the door. I peeked from the kitchen. A courier handed him an envelope, nodded, and left. Henry opened it and frowned slightly. "He's back early," he said, handing me the note inside. It was from Jonathan. No greeting, no apology, just one line. "We need to talk, alone." I folded it neatly and set it on the counter. "Let him wait," I said. Henry studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Good answer." That night, as the neighborhood quieted, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker. The air was heavy, charged with the weight of what was coming. Jonathan would be home tomorrow. The plan was almost complete, the trap perfectly aligned. But that text, "You're not the only one planning something," kept echoing in my thoughts. I told myself it was just paranoia. After all, everything was under control. Still, as I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I couldn't shake the sense that the next few days would test more than just my resolve. The game wasn't over yet. It was about to get personal. The morning Jonathan came back, the sky looked deceptively calm. I'd expected storms, or at least a sense of cinematic drama. Rain lashing the windows, thunder rolling in as he pulled into the driveway. Instead, it was sunny, offensively pleasant, as though the weather had decided to mock me. Henry stood by the window, sipping his coffee. He'd dressed neatly, slacks and a crisp shirt, like he was heading to an interview. "He'll be here by 10, he said. "His flight landed an hour ago." I glanced at the clock. What's the over-under on him trying to charm his way out of this? "Hi," Henry said. "He's the kind of man who believes an apology can be mass-produced." I smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure the audience doesn't applaud." We didn't have to wait long. At 9:53, a car pulled up, a rental, sleek and unfamiliar. I watched him step out, still tan from his vacation, expensive luggage in hand, the same confident gait I'd once found attractive. It looked ridiculous now. He hesitated at the front door before knocking. The pause almost made me laugh. He used to walk in without knocking, announcing himself like the house owed him recognition. Now he waited, as if uncertain of his own welcome. Henry gave me a small nod. "Your stage." I opened the door. Jonathan's smile faltered the moment he saw my face. "Rebecca," he began, his voice too bright, too rehearsed. You look great." "Save the compliments," I said, stepping aside. "You're dripping salt water on my floor." He looked down, flustered. "Can we talk?" "We're talking," I said. He dragged his suitcase in, glanced toward the living room, and froze. On the coffee table sat the folder Henry and I had assembled, labeled neatly in black marker. Evidence. "What's this?" he asked. "Documentation," I said. "You're good at keeping records. I learned from you." His face tightened. "Rebecca, listen." "No," I interrupted. "You listen. Your accounts are frozen. Your company knows about your little financial gymnastics. And before you start accusing anyone of betrayal, maybe ask yourself why there's so much to find." For a moment he didn't move. Then he laughed, the soft, patronizing laugh he used when he thought I was being dramatic. "You're overreacting," he said. "You don't understand how business works. Business doesn't involve luxury villas and secret accounts under your company's name," I said. "Or, say, a cruise with your ex-wife and your business partner." His expression changed instantly. First disbelief, then a flicker of panic. "You've been spying on me." "Researching," I corrected, "like you taught me. Know your opponent before you confront them." "Opponent?" His voice rose. "Is that what we are now?" Henry's voice came from behind us, calm and steady. "That depends on whether you prefer honesty or performance." Jonathan turned sharply. "Henry? You're in on this?" Henry stepped into view, hands clasped behind his back. "Your note invited her to take care of me. I take the job description seriously." For a moment, the room felt electric. Not loud, not violent, just charged. Jonathan's gaze darted between us, confusion and anger mixing like oil and water. "You've lost it," he said finally. "Both of you." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what your company's HR department said this morning." His face drained of its practiced charm. "What?" "They called. Apparently they're curious about some missing funds. Something about invoices with Tom's name on them." Jonathan blinked, stunned, then quieter. "Tom wouldn't." "Tom already did," I said. "He's been emailing your company all week trying to clear his name. The best part? He sent proof. In doing so, he handed them everything they needed." Jonathan rubbed his temples. "You don't understand, Rebecca. This is going to destroy my career." I tilted my head. "Yes, that's the idea." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. For years, I'd been the calm one, the fixer, the listener, the wife who smoothed over his messes. Seeing me unmoved shook him more than anything else. "Rebecca," he said softly, almost pleading, "I made a mistake. I got caught up in things. I can fix this. I just need time." "Time's not refundable," I said. "I already gave you years of it." The silence that followed was so thick it felt alive. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Henry watching Jonathan like a man studying a pattern he'd seen too many times before. "Rebecca," Henry said evenly, "why don't you show him the rest?" I handed Jonathan another envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of his messages, the flirtations, the fake expense reports, the cruise photos. Every page a mirror he didn't want to face. He flipped through them quickly, his breathing shallow. "You had no right," he said finally. I leaned in, voice calm but sharp. "You had no right either, but you took it anyway, so I took it back." He slammed the papers onto the table. "You've ruined everything." "Correction," Henry said from his chair. "She just revealed what you already ruined." Jonathan spun toward him. "Stay out of this." "Too late," Henry said. "I was in it before you bought your first lie." The air trembled between them. Then Jonathan turned back to me, the mask of charm sliding back into place. "Rebecca, we can fix this. You and me. We don't need him interfering. We just need to move past it." I laughed quietly. "You think there's a version of this where you get to say we again?" His voice hardened. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It makes me finished." For a moment, I thought he might lunge, but Henry stood then, calm, unthreatening, yet commanding. "You should leave," Henry said quietly, "before you say something that makes this worse." Jonathan looked between us, then turned, snatched his suitcase, and stormed out. The door slammed behind him. The house exhaled. Henry turned to me. "You handled that better than most people would." "I rehearsed," I said, "in my head for weeks." He nodded approvingly. "He'll be back. They always come back once they realize the fall doesn't stop." And he was right. By that evening, Jonathan had called 7 times. I didn't answer. At 8, he showed up again, this time less angry, more desperate. "Rebecca, please," he said through the door. "Just talk to me." I opened it halfway. "You're trespassing on emotional property," I said. "Stop joking," he snapped. "They're threatening legal action. You have to tell them you made a mistake." "I didn't make a mistake," I said. "I made a decision." He stared at me, as if waiting for me to crack. When I didn't, he laughed bitterly. "You're enjoying this." I shrugged. "You enjoyed your cruise." That set him off. He stormed toward the driveway, shouting something about betrayal. I watched him go, then turned back inside, closing the door with deliberate calm. Henry was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed. "He's unraveling," he said. "Good. Maybe he'll finally understand what tension feels like." That night, I received a message from Claire. "What did you do to Jonathan? He says you're ruining his life." I replied simply, "He ruined it himself. I just organized the paperwork." Her response came fast. "You've gone too far." I didn't bother replying. The next day, the neighborhood buzzed with rumors. Mrs. Danner stopped me on my way to the car, her face bright with curiosity disguised as sympathy. "Rebecca, dear, is it true Jonathan's company is investigating him? People are saying awful things." "Then people are finally catching up," I said. She blinked, not sure whether I was joking. I wasn't. At the hospital, I managed to function through my shift, though I caught myself smiling more than usual. A coworker asked if I'd met someone new. "In a way," I said. "Her name's Dignity." When I got home that evening, the house was quiet except for Henry's low voice from the living room. He was on the phone. "Yes," he said. "I'll tell her." Then he hung up. "Who was that?" I asked. "Your husband's company," he said. "They've officially terminated him." The satisfaction that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, earned, like the click of a lock sliding into place. But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, I found a letter taped to my car windshield. "You think you've won, but you've just started something you can't control." No signature, just familiar handwriting. Tom's. I showed it to Henry. He frowned, folding it neatly. "He's nervous. Cornered animals bark." "I don't like threats." "They're not threats," he said. "They're confessions in disguise." That night, we stayed up late discussing next steps. Henry wanted to prepare for retaliation. I wanted to finish what we'd started. "He still has that house in his name," I said. "The one near the lake. He bought it with my contribution, remember?" "Yes." "I want it back, not legally, symbolically." Henry's lips twitched into a rare smile. "You have something in mind?" "Just a visit." The following afternoon, I drove to the lake house. The gate was locked, but I still had the code. Inside, the place looked untouched, like a show home staged for someone else's life. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, remembering how he'd promised we'd spend weekends here. We never did. Before I left, I opened all the windows. The breeze scattered papers, knocked over picture frames. I didn't take anything, didn't destroy anything, just rearranged the illusion. When Jonathan came here next, it would look like the house itself had rejected him. When I returned home, Henry was waiting with dinner and 2 glasses of wine. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Lighter," I said. "Like gravity's finally working in my favor." We ate quietly. Outside, the sky darkened, and the wind picked up, that kind of whispering wind that carries change. Henry glanced toward the window. "It's almost done," he said. "Almost," I agreed. "But not yet." Because I knew Jonathan, he wasn't the type to disappear quietly. He'd come back one more time, convinced he could reclaim control. And when he did, I'd be ready. The house felt alive that night, every shadow listening, every floorboard waiting. I sat in the dark living room, the faint hum of the fridge filling the silence, and thought, tomorrow, the real confrontation begins. The arrangement was complete. Now came the collapse. He arrived just after dusk, headlights cutting through the drizzle that had started around 5. I was standing by the kitchen window when the car slowed in front of the house. The sound of the tires on wet pavement felt deliberate, like an announcement. Henry was in the living room, reading the paper. He didn't even glance up. "He's back," he said. "You sound like you were expecting him." "I was," he said, "and so were you." I watched Jonathan step out of the car. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale under the streetlight. The swagger was gone. He looked smaller, not physically, but in the way a man shrinks when the world stops clapping for him. I took a deep breath, adjusted the sleeves of my sweater, and opened the door before he could knock. "Rebecca," he started, his voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk. Please." "You keep saying that," I said. "Funny how you only find your voice when you lose control." He looked at me helplessly. "You've made a mistake. I've lost everything. My job, my accounts. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'm aware," I said. "I itemized it." His eyes flicked to Henry, who was standing behind me now, calm as ever. "You," Jonathan hissed, "you're behind this." Henry gave a small shrug. "I prefer the term advisor." Jonathan turned back to me. "You think he's helping you? He's manipulating you? He hates me." "No," I said quietly. "He understands me. You never did." Jonathan stepped closer, water dripping from his jacket onto the hardwood floor. "Rebecca, please. I can fix this. We can start over. I just need—" I cut him off. "You need money. You need status. You need everyone to believe you're still the man they admired. But what you don't need, and never did, is me." He stared at me for a long time, searching for some trace of the woman who would have once softened at that speech. She wasn't here anymore. "Where's my car?" he asked suddenly, voice rising. "It's gone." "Repossession," Henry said flatly. "Company car. They wanted it back." Jonathan's face flushed with frustration. "You can't do this to me." "I didn't," I said. "You did it to yourself." For a moment he just stood there, trembling, not from cold but from disbelief. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out the door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the frame. Henry exhaled. "That won't be his last visit." "I know," I said, "but next time I'll be ready." The next morning I left early for work, but halfway through my shift my phone buzzed. A message from Henry. He came back, angry, "Don't rush home." I finished my shift like everything was normal, smiling at patients, updating charts, handing off cases. The discipline of routine felt like armor. When I finally drove home that evening, the front yard was quiet. Henry was sitting on the porch, a calm sentry with a cup of tea. "He broke a lamp," he said when I stepped up. Yelled a bit, then left again. "No real damage." "I told you he'd spiral," I said. "You did," Henry said, "and he's just getting started." I looked toward the street, where Jonathan's car had been parked the night before. Now it was gone. "Let him unravel," I said. "He's good at it." Henry's mouth curved in something between a smile and a sigh. "You're handling this better than most professionals I worked with." Maybe I missed my calling. You haven't missed anything, he said. You're just finding it now. We went inside, both of us moving with the quiet coordination of people who shared the same unspoken goal. I poured myself a glass of water, turned, and asked, "What if he comes back again?" Henry's gaze was steady. "Then we'll finish it." 2 days later, he did come back, but this time he didn't knock. I heard the garage door creak open first, the one he'd installed but never maintained. The motor stuttered, then gave up halfway. I slipped quietly to the hallway and peeked through the glass panel. Jonathan was inside, pacing, looking around like a stranger in his own house. He was talking to himself. "She can't do this. I built this life. She'll see what happens when I lose everything." He kicked over a box of tools. The clatter echoed through the garage. I opened the door to the kitchen and said evenly, "Careful. You'll break something else that's already yours." He spun around, startled. "Rebecca, don't play games." "I'm not playing," I said. "That's your department." He stepped closer. "You've humiliated me. Do you have any idea what it's like to have everyone whispering? To lose your job, your reputation, your integrity?" I offered. "You can't lose what you never had." He glared at me. "You wanted revenge. Fine. You've had it. But you're not better than me." I tilted my head. "I don't need to be. I just need to be finished." The tension was thick enough to feel. He stood there breathing heavily, the garage light flickering overhead. For a moment, I thought he might lash out. Instead, he stormed past me into the living room. Henry was standing near the doorway, silent, watching. Jonathan froze at the sight of him. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Jonathan muttered. "Still here? What are you, her bodyguard?" Henry didn't blink. "More like a witness." Jonathan laughed bitterly. "To what? Her crusade?" "To your collapse," Henry said quietly. Jonathan turned back to me. "You think you're untouchable now? You think this makes you powerful?" I took a slow breath. "No, it makes me precise." He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "You really think this is over?" "It's about to be," I said. He took one step closer, and that's when Henry moved. Not fast, just enough to make Jonathan stop. The room felt like a held breath. "You should go," Henry said. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "You can't stop me from being here. My name's still on the deed." "For now," Henry said, "but the sheriff's sale notice will change that soon. You used marital assets to fund your adventures. She'll get the house." Jonathan's bravado faltered. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," Henry said. "I helped file the paperwork." The color drained from Jonathan's face. You did this?" Henry just looked at him. "She did this. I just made sure it stuck." Jonathan turned back to me, anger and disbelief warring across his face. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said, "and every reason." He looked around, as if realizing for the first time that this house, this life, was no longer his stage. The furniture, the photos, the light itself, everything seemed to reject him. "You'll regret this," he whispered. "I doubt it," I said. "I'm an ER nurse. Regret is for people who don't act in time." He turned sharply and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, but this time it felt victorious. Henry looked at me. "It's done." "Almost," I said. "There's one more person left." He raised an eyebrow. "Tom." I nodded. Finding him wasn't hard. He still worked at the same glossy downtown office, the kind that screamed overcompensation. I parked across the street, waiting until he came out for lunch. When he finally appeared, dressed in a tailored suit and sunglasses too large for his face, I stepped out of the car and crossed the street. He froze when he saw me. "Rebecca," he said, startled, "what are you—" "Relax," I said, smiling. "I'm not here to ruin your day. I'm here to give it a little context." He frowned. "I don't know what you mean." Sure you do, I said. You were on that cruise. You helped him move money around. You watched him throw away a marriage, and you smiled while he did it. He swallowed hard. Look, I didn't know. Stop lying, I said, my voice sharp now. You knew exactly what you were doing. But I'm not here to drag you down. I just want to make sure you remember your part in all this. He started to protest, but I stepped closer, lowering my voice. If you ever try to contact me again, if you even think about playing hero for Jonathan, I'll make sure your boss sees everything. Every invoice, every transfer. Your name is all over them. His face went pale. You wouldn't... I would, I said, and I'd smile while doing it. He backed away a little, his confidence evaporating. You're crazy. Maybe, I said, but I'm thorough. Before he could respond, I turned and walked toward his car, that same black Audi I'd decorated earlier. I ran my hand along the hood, then looked back at him. You should really get this repainted. The scratch looks worse in daylight. His mouth fell open. I smiled and walked away. By the time I got home, the rain had started again, light but steady. Henry was waiting on the porch, as always. Well, he asked. Handled, I said. He studied me for a moment. I didn't hurt anyone, I said. Just their sense of security. He nodded approvingly. Good. Fear is more useful than pain. I sat down beside him, letting the quiet settle. The neighborhood was calm, the kind of calm that comes after a storm, when everyone pretends nothing happened. He'll come one last time, Henry said. I know, I said, and I'm ready. The sky was turning violet when the sound of a car engine drifted down the street. Familiar, predictable. Jonathan was back. He didn't knock this time. He burst through the door, face red, voice raw with anger. You think you've won? You think you can just erase me? I stood calmly, arms folded. Erase you? No, you're too memorable for that. I'm just closing the file. He lunged forward, and for the first time I saw real fear behind his eyes. Not of me, but of his own unraveling. Henry stepped between us, but I raised a hand. No need, I said. This is my scene. Jonathan's breathing was ragged. You ruined my life. No, I said. I revealed it. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words never came. The silence stretched, heavy and final. Then he dropped to his knees, not in remorse, not in surrender, but in sheer exhaustion. Please, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I have nothing left. I crouched down so we were eye level. Then you finally know what honesty feels like. He looked up at me, searching for mercy. There was none to find. I reached into the drawer and pulled out an envelope, thick and sealed. I placed it on the floor in front of him. The label read, Alimony Prepaid. What's this? He asked. Your exit package, I said. Every document you'll need for the divorce. Signed, filed, final. He stared at it, then at me. You planned this from the start. Not from the start, I said. From the moment you told me I was imagining things. I stood and turned away, my voice steady. You should go before the neighbors see you like this. He didn't move for a long time. When he finally did, it was slow, defeated. He picked up the envelope, stumbled to his feet, and walked out without another word. The door closed softly behind him. Henry let out a long breath. You ended it well. I didn't end it, I said. I concluded it. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the porch. I watched the taillights fade down the street and felt something settle deep inside me. Not peace exactly, but completion. Henry looked at me. You know, Rebecca, you never needed saving. I smiled faintly. No, I just needed strategy. The thunder rolled somewhere far away, but the house felt calm, grounded. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control. Not angry, not vengeful, just steady. Tomorrow there would be paperwork and silence. But tonight, there was nothing left to prove. Thanksgiving had started with an empty house. Now it ended with clarity, and that was enough. By the time dawn stretched across the quiet suburban street, I'd already been awake for hours. The air in the house was still, heavy with the faint smell of rain and something else. Resolution. Jonathan's suitcase was gone. His car was gone. His voice, that confident hum that once filled these rooms, was gone too. Henry was sitting at the kitchen table with his usual cup of black coffee. He didn't say good morning, just nodded as if we'd been waiting for this moment all along. "Sleep?" he asked. "Barely," I said, "but it feels like the right kind of tired." He folded the newspaper and pushed it aside. "It's over then." "Almost," I said. "He still has to understand what over means." Henry gave me that small, approving smile. "You really don't like unfinished business." "No," I said, "and neither do you." The day moved slowly, like the world itself was cautious around me. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, threw out the wilted flowers Jonathan had bought before his trip. Some kind of peace offering I hadn't realized was camouflage for guilt. The petals crumbled in my hands. The gesture had aged worse than the bouquet. By noon, the house looked like a showroom again. Everything in its place, spotless, ready. The calm before the final act. Henry stepped out of his room dressed in a dark jacket, looking more detective than retiree. "He'll come back," he said. "He always does," I replied. And sure enough, around 3 o'clock, I saw the rental pull into the driveway again. The same car, same driver. Jonathan stepped out, but this time he didn't look angry. He looked defeated. His shirt was untucked, his hair messy, his face drawn. He was carrying the envelope I'd given him last night. I met him at the front door, arms crossed. "Forgot something." He held up the envelope. "You filed everything already." "Yes." "You didn't even give me a chance to—" "To what?" I interrupted. "To explain, to promise, to start another cycle of sorry followed by repetition." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't have to be cruel, Rebecca." I laughed, not loudly, just enough for him to hear the irony. "Cruelty would be pretending I believed you again. This is kindness. I'm ending the performance before the encore." He stepped closer. "You used to care about me." "I used to care about my own reflection in your approval," I said. "Now I care about quiet." He looked past me into the living room, at the faint outline of the folder still sitting on the coffee table. "So this is it," he said. "This is it," I confirmed. He sighed, eyes flicking toward the street, where a few neighbors pretended not to stare. "They're watching." "They always were," I said. "Now they're just seeing what was there all along." He hesitated, something bitter curling in his expression. "You've made me a spectacle." "No," I said calmly. "You made yourself one." "I just turned on the lights." He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled sharply and turned toward the car. "I hope this makes you happy." "It doesn't," I said. "It makes me free." He paused, as if those words landed heavier than anything else I'd said. Then he got in the car, started the engine, and backed out of the driveway without another word. The sound faded down the street until all that was left was the soft hiss of wind through the trees. Henry came to stand beside me. That sounded final. It was. "You sure?" "Yes." We stood in silence for a while, just watching the empty road. The neighbors slowly drifted back into their houses, their curiosity satisfied for the day. Somewhere a lawnmower started, and life resumed its comfortable suburban rhythm. "Do you feel different?" Henry asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "Not better, just balanced." He nodded, thoughtful. "Balance is the most anyone ever gets." I turned toward him. "What about you, Henry? You seem a little too calm for someone who just helped orchestrate a domestic coup." He smiled, faint but genuine. "Let's just say this isn't my first cleanup. People think revenge is messy. It isn't if you do it right." I tilted my head. "You enjoyed this, didn't you?" He didn't deny it. "A little, but mostly I enjoyed watching you stop waiting for permission." That made me laugh. You have a strange sense of encouragement. Comes with age, he said. You learn that sometimes the only way to save someone is to stop them from being polite. We went back inside. I made coffee. He read his paper. The house felt different, lighter, even with the weight of what had happened. Around sunset, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The sky glowed with the last streaks of orange and gold, and the air smelled faintly of wet grass and wood smoke. Mrs. Danner was out watering her plants, pretending not to wait for gossip. "Evening, Rebecca," she called. "Evening," I replied. "Quiet day?" "The quietest," I said, smiling. She looked like she wanted to ask more, but I didn't give her the chance. I just kept walking, each step slower, steadier. I passed house after house, perfect lawns, polished cars, families behind windows pretending everything was fine. The suburb was a stage, and everyone was rehearsing the same script. But not me. My performance was over. When I got back, Henry was sitting on the porch, watching the last of the light fade. He handed me a folded document. "One more for your collection," he said. It was a letter from Jonathan's employer confirming his termination and financial penalties. "They'll be pressing civil charges," Henry said. "Not criminal. He's too small for that, but enough to keep him busy." I folded the letter and slipped it into the folder. Let him be busy. It keeps him out of imagination range. Henry smiled faintly. "You really have thought this through." "Overthinking is my best talent," I said. He stood and stretched. "Then my work here is done." I looked at him, suddenly aware that this might be the last time we'd share this kind of quiet. "You're leaving?" He nodded. "You don't need me anymore." "You've already written your ending." I wanted to say something sentimental, but Henry wasn't the type to tolerate that, so I just nodded. "Thank you." He gave me a rare grin. "Don't thank me. I just held the flashlight while you found your way out." With that, he walked down the steps, hands in his pockets, disappearing into the twilight, like a man who'd never really belonged to daylight anyway. I stood there a long time, watching until he was gone. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and took one last look around the living room. The walls were bare now, the pictures I'd taken down stacked neatly in a box. The house felt bigger, like it had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. I went to the window and saw the reflection of the driveway where Jonathan had once parked his car, his pride, his declaration of success. It looked empty now, but not lonely, just honest. My phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. "You got what you wanted?" I typed back, "No, I got what was fair." Then I turned off the phone. For a long moment, I stood there, letting the silence sink in. The clock ticked softly. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler hissed to life. Everything was ordinary again. And that was the extraordinary part. I sat down at the kitchen table, where this had all started. The note he'd left on Thanksgiving still rested in the drawer. I pulled it out one last time, smoothed the creases, and placed it on the table beside a fresh cup of coffee. The paper looked smaller than I remembered, harmless now, a relic of arrogance. I took a slow sip and smiled. "Happy Thanksgiving, Jonathan," I said softly to the empty house. "Consider this my gratitude list." I stood, opened the back door, and let the wind take the note from my hand. It lifted, spun once, and drifted into the dusk. The porch light flickered on automatically, casting a soft glow over the yard. Somewhere down the street, laughter drifted from a neighbor's backyard, the sound of people unaware that revolutions could happen quietly, behind trimmed hedges and polite smiles. I leaned against the doorframe, watching the last trace of paper vanish into the night. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not forgiveness, not answers, not him. The story had started with a house full of silence. It ended with silence too, but this time it was mine. And that, I realized, was the truest kind of peace.